Mr. Gir, thank you for this interview. Can Macedonia start the European Union negotiations this year? And in your information, how is the screening process going?
Thanks very much for the opportunity to join you today. The process, the accession process has already opened for North Macedonia and for Albania. That happened last July, and it was immediately followed by the beginning of the screening process. The screening has two elements. First of all, on the European Commission side, there is an explanation of the laws and standards that exist in the European Union and of recent developments. And then there's a very intensive interaction between the two sides, looking at where the gaps are in terms of legislation, implementation and enforcement, so that this country knows what needs to be done to bring it up to the standards of the European Union. Now, the good news is that this is going very well. The teams are very engaged, very professional. There is a good momentum, there is dynamism in the process.
What if we don't get two-thirds majority? You said we started, but what if we don't get two-thirds majority by November for the second intergovernmental conference?
The question of the constitution is obviously a sovereign choice for this country to make. I would make just a few remarks which perhaps are not, add a few elements which are perhaps not in the public debate enough. Of course, it will be important to look at the precise proposals to amend the constitution once they're prepared and published. The first thing I would say is that this country has a good record on inter-ethnic relations, inter-community relations, and this change to the constitution would only consolidate that. A second thing I would say is, as I've just mentioned, there is momentum at the moment in the process, and the way is the way is open. The next step in this process is an automatic one, which depends only on this country making the steps it needs to in order to fulfill its bilateral commitment it's made with Bulgaria. So in this context, given that there is momentum, and given that politicians from across the political divide state that they are committed to the European Union future of this country, it's important that this debate is conducted in a responsible way, and that all stakeholders think long and hard about the bigger strategic interest involved.
The opposition party, VMRO-DPMN, have said that they will not vote for the constitutional amendments until they receive firm guarantees from the European Union that there will be no any more demands and obstructions from Bulgaria. Is there a mechanism by which the European Union can provide such kind of guarantees?
In terms of guarantees, as you know, in this process, in the accession process, there are many many moments in the accession process when there is a need for decisions to be taken by unanimity. What's important is that there is a responsibility on our side to ensure that when those decisions come, they are made on the basis of the reforms that the country is putting, the European Union related reforms that the country is putting in place, and not on other issues. This was very much the sense of what both President von der Leyen and President Michel conveyed when they visited Skopje last July. So, of course, this is a very important element, but the best guarantee for moving forward, of course, is to implement those reforms, because that's the fastest way to come into the European Union.
According to latest polls, Euroscepticism in this country is increasing. How much of this do you think is because of the dispute with Bulgaria? And is the European Union doing enough to be visible in Macedonia? Can we expect new financial or energy assistance from the Union?
I understand the frustration that people feel that it's taken so long to open accession negotiations. The country waited a long time, too long. But you know, we are today in a very different situation. In the course of the last couple of years, there has been an increasing commitment and seriousness from the European Union side to the enlargement perspective of this region and some others. And this has intensified following Russia's war against Ukraine. So we see a real momentum. It's very important that this country is able to make the most of that momentum. The important thing about the accession process, to say, is that the European Union will accompany this country on every step of the way, and we're already doing that. We are by far the largest donor to this country. We provide something in the range of about 100 million euros per year. So if you go to any country, any city, village or town across the country, you'll see evidence of the practical benefits that our support has already provided. But we're also there, of course, in times of crisis. And you see that now, where we have promised up to 100 million euros in support to help stabilize the financial situation in the light of the economic pressures arising from Russia's war against Ukraine. We've also put on the table and provided now an energy package of some 80 million euros to help tackle the energy consequences of the war. Now, these are all abstract figures, but in fact, they're about real people. The European Union accounts for some 60% of this country's trade. And in terms of foreign direct investment, European businesses and companies represent nearly 70% of trade. So we are the overwhelming partner, not because of altruism, but because we see this country as an investment and as a future EU member state.
How do you assess the reform process in this country? There is constant talk by political actors about the rule of law and the fight against corruption, but the perception amongst the citizens is totally different. The perception is that things change very little and too slow.
Now, you mentioned two areas which are absolutely essential, crucial. That is the reform of the rule of law and the fight against corruption. These are so important that within our accession process, we look at them at every single step of the way, from the very first day to the conclusion of the process and the entry into the European Union. In both of those areas, you can say that some progress has been made. If you look, for example, in the area of corruption, the work of the State Commission for the Prevention of Corruption or the State Audit Office, there are important steps that have been made by them, in particular in dealing with things like clientelism. But we still have to ask why some of the recommendations from both bodies are not acted upon. In the judiciary, you can find parts of the judiciary where there are clearly committed individuals, institutions which are performing better. But we know that in both areas, an enormous amount, we still have a very long way to go. And there needs to be tremendous efforts led by government, but also involving the different institutions with the support of civil society and others to really push forward reform.
The agreement with Frontex was signed in the Macedonian language. Can the European Union guarantee that the Macedonian language will be one of the official languages in the Union after our accession, considering the unilateral declaration of Bulgaria? I'm basically asking you, will we enter the European Union as Macedonians speaking the Macedonian language?
And no country loses its identity on the way to the European Union. And I think this country can be confident in terms of its identity, its culture, and its language. And you rightly refer to the Frontex agreement, because in that agreement, what it does, the agreement is in different languages. It's in fact in 24 EU official languages and in the Macedonian language, all of which are treated as equally valid. So already a strong sign of where the Macedonian language stands. And we ourselves in the delegation of the European Union, here we are in Skopje, have recently launched an initiative to promote Macedonian literature. We call it the birth of the word, after Aco Shupov. Again, this is, I think, a strong sign of our support for the very rich Macedonian identity and culture, which I think the European Union can benefit from.
Ambassador Geer, thank you for this interview.
Thank you very much.